Hey everyone, welcome back to Inventing Construction. I'm Ross Griffin, and today we have a very special guest back with a bang. Sean John, the Kerry man, aka twice as good.
Indeed.
Twice as good looking.
To be honest, from a HR perspective, this is gold. Gold.
Lovely. I am the HR manager, so it's okay. But the main topic to discuss today is cost management. It's not just estimating. We have that conversation a lot. 4 subtopics for you guys. Sean's going to explain what is meant by that. Cost management is not just estimating. Incorporating change and risk management in the workflow of cost management. Digital workflows improve accuracy. Interesting topic there on digitization. And how to communicate this with your client. And what we mean by this is cost management, risk management, change management, all wrapped up in that overarching heading of commercial management, I'd say. Mm-hmm. But Sean, maybe you can give the guys an introduction again to yourself, even though you were on there last year with us. You're back again.
So I'm Sean O'Connor. I've been with KOSMOS now circa 7-8 months. Quantity surveyor for the last 20 odd years. Done a lot of contract management, a lot of projects both as client and as client developer and as QS. Yeah. So a very mixed experience.
Yeah. But we often come, I guess, across in our industry, this kind of understanding that cost management is estimating, and all we do is give a price. We price something, and obviously, over the last number of years, we've been trying to change that narrative, especially on the international market outside the UK and Ireland, that cost management is not just estimating, it's much, much more. But can you explain that?
So from our perspective, the key thing here is it's an all-encompassing project delivery strategy, commercial management, cost management. Yeah. So whilst we might set budgets at the outset, and I would emphasize setting realistic budgets, so going to someone who understands the market, who the players are, what the type of the product you're looking for. Yeah. So when they set a budget, that's in the right order of cost. As you move through the stages then, whether that's going from estimates to cost plans, you get to a point where you now get into managing those budgets. Yeah. So for me, it's all about the granularity and transparency for our clients. Yeah. So initially you might have, I want a building. Yeah. It's 10,000 square meters. Yeah.
Functionality is X.
So you're really at high level stuff.
So cost management is not just estimating then. So change management, risk management, all encompassing commercial management really is what we're trying to get that message out.
And it's the clarity, I suppose, and understanding how that fits into their project. Yeah. So just like with any industry, if you've a sore leg, you'll go to a doctor. Yeah. With doing commercial management in construction, you need someone who's the expertise to manage your money and help your team understand how that's being spent. So that's not just simply how much does it cost, but it's actually how do we manage the granularity of each budget. So the majority of our projects are significant in value, multifaceted, multiple stakeholders managing them, different budget constraints, controls. You could have 150 different shareholder suppliers feeding into that. And for us, what we try and do is drive the granularity and transparency into that budget management. So the budget isn't just a fixed entity of, you said it was 100 million or 50 million or 20 million, but you now have a budget that you're working within with a realistic level of contingency that the whole team have bought into. We'll come to that in a moment about risk, understanding risk. Yeah. But then what you do is you're tracking against your actual costs. So really, if you're using your commercial manager correctly as a client, I'd say you should be saying how much you need to be open with them to say, this is how much I'm paying out. Yeah. So now you've got actuals feeding into it. Then you've also got committed costs feeding against your budget. How much have we placed orders for? 50 million out of 100, 70 out of 100. So you have to have that money banked. And now you're looking at your ETC, your estimate to complete. Now you really are challenging your team to work within that constraint. For me, that's commercial management.
Yeah. And I think, again, coming back to the just estimating, preparing an estimate is one thing, but as a client, you need to have a strategy of how you're going to spend that. And yes, we understand that you're going to spend it on the building that you want to build, but how are you going to divide that up in terms of procurement, for example? What's your strategy? That's even down to your consultants, not just your contractor. There's a whole aspect to this cost management, commercial management, and estimating is just one sliver or facet of the entire kind of skill set of delivery.
Absolutely. I think we should think of it. I go back to, you have an accountant. Some people have accountants to manage their own finances.
Yeah.
It just happens that you're now in a place where you've got a commercial cost manager who's actively involved. They're a step better than an accountant when you're managing your money because they understand the process.
Yeah.
So I would argue, not only do you have construction costs, and like we manage for our clients at the moment, we've got different clients who like to manage their construction budgets by ICMS structure, so International Cost Measurement Standards. Yeah. Then you've got some who like to manage it by package. Yeah. So now you're getting into how would you like your cake cut? Because we can mind it in that fashion and you can understand the drawdown and the expenditure of it. Now you come on to completely outside of the contractor's costs. How am I handling my own client costs? My fees, my fit out budgets. Have we got enough in each of them? Have we got enough contingency in each of them? Are there risks that we need to manage outside of that? Like, it becomes multifaceted for someone who's trained to manage. Now imagine you're giving it to someone whose job is to deliver the project. So this is why you need different skill sets to come in and to support your team in delivering large projects or medium to large projects. Because I certainly wouldn't embark on spending any type of money unless I had the correct controls in place.
It's an interesting one because we've been having discussions recently on the pharma industry, data center industry, mission critical, and some organizations and how they structure their teams. And when it comes to commercial is they've doing estimates at the beginning. Then the estimates are handed over to project controls, and I queried a number of people on this. What's the background of experience and education on the project controls, generally from financing or business.
Yeah.
And so that control that you believe you're buying isn't actually control.
It's reporting.
It's reporting, exactly.
Yeah, it's after the event. The crash has happened.
Yeah.
They're just telling you it happened.
Yeah. And so the realization for me winning those conversations is that the cost manager, commercial manager, and the team associated with them, they bring not just the experience and knowledge base around cost and estimating, but commercial and technical. They understand how a building is built. They understand architecture. They understand structures, MEP,
the program, how it fits together,
sustainability, LCA and carbon, etc. All of that aspect that have a direct impact on your budget, on your costs, on your estimate to complete. And it's that skill set that is what we're talking about, that commercial management, not just estimating.
So I kind of refer to that as a healthy tension that can exist in a project. You want a cooperative team that communicate openly with each other, but you also need somebody who's controlling and managing, who's thinking a few months ahead. So, like, give you an example of a recent activity we were working on with one particular client. We wanted to get ahead out of this reporting situation into managing. So we took an active role in helping the contractor tender. So actually issuing the BQs, fully interactive with the contractor and the client, so everyone understood the scope, issuing that to the designers so they could go, yeah, actually that's exactly what I drew, or certain things are missing. Let's identify them now, we'll put them on the next stage. Really, it should be in the design. But we're in a place where that type of active management,
collaboration, or
that kind of active involvement of each other. We are in a far greater place as a team, contractor included in that, of visibility of what the client wants. So we're all aligned. So there was no misunderstanding of quantities. So at times we were able to bring up the models and go, we don't think we need this item. That somebody might say, and we go, so we don't need this item that's currently drawn. Oh, actually, I do, yeah. So it's really using, now you're talking,
interactive,
allowing your tech to enable the team to understand it at a much quicker level. So we weren't doing this in silos. This was collaborative workshops, smaller workshops, but collaborative sessions, bringing them up, bringing subcontractors and suppliers into those. Like, that's when it starts to get exciting, because the sub is saying, actually, I don't price that item like this. If you change and do this, this and this, I can come back with a slightly better way of looking at it. And
those type of interactions, it's not necessarily face to face around the table, right? This stuff is managed remotely on Teams and online, etc.
Well, I was in Ireland. Some of them were elsewhere in Europe, and some were further afield. So, but the thing is, that interaction was happening purely, well, some of it in purely digital space. And we're sharing the models live. We get the models every 7 to 10 days. You're now in a place where that's useful for the team because we can react quickly.
Yeah.
So things that we can't afford, we can immediately flag them and go, are you sure you wanted this?
Nice to have, need to have. Is this really a need to have or nice to have? It's nice to have. Well, we need to put that away then.
Are you sure you can afford it? You're going to find budget for us. So that's coming back to the estimate was one element, one ingredient.
Yeah.
You move away from that ingredient as you go through the process.
Yeah.
It's there as a yardstick for us all to understand.
That's your target, I guess, right?
It's absolutely, but you're kind of now you've got, instead of having one number, you'll have, if you take your cost build up from your contractor, that could be thousands of items, could be hundreds of items. Yeah. Now you're into how do we interface with the project team and how do we control that money pot for the client? So we're into cost centers.
Yeah.
And now you're into, do we want to do that by package or else?
Yeah, I think that's your procurement there. Then, so like you're describing, and what seems to be an awful lot of different facets to this commercial management. And some of our listeners might go, "Well, hang on a second, Sean. We're already kind of doing that. You have the procurement team that deal with procurement. You have the project controls team that dealing with the controlling." The reporting, you have the project manager doing the risk and change. You have the architects and engineers managing change and design.
Your engineer who's brilliant at managing costs for you, and all these people that's not their main duty or their main role to you or skill set. Exactly. Yeah. I would argue you absolutely need somebody who's going to be solely dedicated and selfish to maintaining rigor, control, discipline. And it's not just about cost, it's data. It's about the underlying design. It's going back to the scope. Yeah. I wanted 20 blue doors. Yeah. You've ordered 24 red doors. Yeah. Why? I don't need 24. I need 20. And that one doesn't comply with the standards I need to sell the asset. Yeah. Yeah. So can you please price what I've asked for? Yeah. Or tell me why I can't have that. Yeah. And there's a commercial association with that then. If we get into a discussion around, well, it's red doors that we have on site. We wanted blue. Do the red fit? What's the cost impact? Plus or minus to use the client or to use the supplier, et cetera, and that commercial relationship and negotiation. I argue now, and I don't want to defend any of our designer friends out there, but that's not their skill set. Some of them are brilliant at it. I don't disagree. But what I would say, when you're handling any relatively large sum of money, a conflict of interest will occur. Yeah. Something needs to be designed. It might have been forgotten about. It may not. You're in a place where what you want is someone who's impartial, very factual, but also going back to the point about you're managing a budget to actual costs, to committed costs to an ETC. Yeah. Estimate to complete. Exactly. Very few engineers, architects will carry to that granularity because they won't be interfacing with your accounts team. Yeah. No, very rarely do. Yeah. Imagine trying to correlate purchase orders back to cost centers, back to priceable items. They'd be lost. Yeah. And I don't think that's a bad thing. No. I think the key thing here is about transparency and granularity, transparency in what the product is and how we're paying a fair price for it. Yeah. So we had an instance in the last probably couple of months. We had a project that we were working on and there was a degree of ambiguity of certain prices that were coming back. So we said, how can we eradicate that or remove it? So the key thing is we said, right, let's come to a common space. Let's all agree that we're all going to use the model. Yeah. And we'll all interrogate the model collaboratively, feed it back, and periodically get it updated. So before we need the output, so before we need to produce the package and do the BQ, that we've had 2 or 3 goes at this. So nobody messes the program. Center point of information becomes the model then. Yeah. We now get to a point where, and what we did in that is, I said, let's get some of the key subbies involved, because let's give them a draft and let's see if they come up with something different. And the brilliant thing was we all kind of evolved into a situation that we all had a kind of a center of truth that we're happy, the client was happy to work with. As you mentioned, it's been interrogated by all the stakeholder groups that have an opinion involvement. 7 or 8 good people. You're now in a place where we instantly got to a fraction of where we needed to be. But the constant was the quantities, which some people go, I need 5,000 there, I need 3,000 there. Actually, the factual answer is 2,500. Are you pricing risk now into your quantities? Which is, for me, again, it's let's understand where we're letting risk in. Because if it's real, who should own it? As opposed to, there's just money in there. Just keep putting in, risk on risk, which is cost on cost or price on price, So that's a really useful collaborative way to approach cost management. But it seems like there's many different aspects to this commercial management
role that's not just estimating. But what the common theme in the entire thing is that depreciation for your budget, your cost, and the impact of the daily workings. So change management, for example, and risks on that cost. And the client has assurance that there's someone that has 100% focus every day looking at this, making sure that we're on the right track.
So the key thing I'd say to any client or any whoever's in charge of that is clear roles and responsibilities. So we'll talk about change and risk in two separate ways. So change for me, change needs to be clear. And I would say before anybody embarks on doing any form of change, I call them one-pagers. I'd expect my designers to do a one-pager of what the change is likely to do. Have a chat with the contractor, put an order of cost. Again, a pure finger in the air, order of cost. Or we could do it ourselves. Yeah. But being collaborative, you get the people who are going to be taking a risk on it to take a view. So we have a one-pager, take a view on an order of cost. Tell the client, look, this change is going to cost. It'll save you $500,000. It'll cost you $2 million, whichever it is. Actually, you know what? We need some fees on that because now I need to get this designer.
Impact, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So you also weigh it up in terms of life cycle cost. Is it going to affect our sustainability credits? I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
And it could. You have to consider it in its in all aspects. Does it affect the net little area?
Not in isolation. And a lot of change, really, we notice is, if not managed from a commercial perspective, is managed from a design perspective, and it's managed in isolation of everything around it. So we're assuming that what we're doing, moving the wall, adding a wall, has no impact on anything else.
Operations.
Only the wall. But your ventilation's affected, your lighting control's affected, your finishes are affected, etc.
You may not be able to put the piece of equipment that they wanted in the other room into it.
Yeah, exactly.
So that kind of holistic view on change allows the team to come together, everyone a chance to review it. So give them a bit of time, at which point then you go back and say, is it yes or no?
Yeah.
And we need a positive instruction.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because if you give positive instruction to one entity, so let's say to the contractor, that's fine, but it could be someone else's duty in the client's team to say it to consultant 1 and consultant 2. Yeah. They tell consultant 1, but forget consultant 2.
Yeah.
Now you get a point, 3 or 4, 5 months moves on.
Forgot.
Consultant 2 is gone, you've asked me to do this change, I'll do it for you. That's the cost of it.
Yeah.
Now, because that wasn't factored into the design 5 months ago, you now have abortive costs.
Yeah.
So it's about having that really systematic approach to data, because all you're doing really is coordinating the team. It's the hymn sheet, and is everyone singing?
Yeah.
So for me, that flows nicely into how do I then manage that change, which I may or may not have taught, against my overall budget.
Yeah. And the thing about change management for me, I think, is defining a clear roadmap process, right? How do we get from A to B? Who along that roadmap takes the decision? Who has responsibility for the decision? If it's the client, depending on the value, if it's the construction director, construction manager, if it's the commercial manager, if it's the architect, engineer, it doesn't really matter. But identifying who is clear responsibility there. And then what we like to see is we use Dalux as a platform for that digital communication. So you have historical information of the process, who said what, when, and why along the approval process. And that's hugely powerful.
So I think the key thing there is workflows as well. You have to set up your workflow correctly. And I would say to every team out there, spend a half a day just designing your workflows. Whether it's Dalux or another, we use multiple tools for that. I think the key thing is have an agreed workflow. Stick to it, and if you need to, then signpost a change in it and amend it if it's not quite working for you, because that's really the tool. It needs to be
dynamic.
It needs to be dynamic. So just because you had at the start the 15 other things that have crept in, you need to look at those. And that's exactly what I try to do with the teams I work with. You need to be dynamic enough to be able to go, hold on a second, this isn't working. This is affecting somebody over here in accounts, or it's procurement, or whoever it might be. We need them more, because what we need is at the end of the job, we need all the pieces of the puzzle to fit back together. So procurement ties in nicely, accounts tie in nicely. It all falls into place. All our warranties, guarantees, everything are in place. The product looks fantastic. The quality assurance has been done. And we're talking about cost management, who some people think are estimating.
Yeah, exactly.
This is so far away from that beginning. So for me, the change is multidimensional, really.
And of course, risk management then is another key component, right? So ideally, if if we do the job very well, we can mitigate all our risk. But the reality of it is that some risks are not, it's not possible to mitigate. You can only manage. Again, this is not cost estimating anymore now. This is commercial management in its totality we're talking about.
So one of the things that we try to deploy, and we've deployed probably several projects, I would say in all projects, but really actively so on some of the bigger ones.
Depends on the client's needs as well. Say you might, you might offer it to the client. The client might say, again, actually we're doing that, or the contractor's doing that, or the architect and engineer doing it. And going, but is there an overall risk process that is linked commercially to your budgets and so on, and your daily, weekly, monthly management plan?
So most clients will apply, some clients will apply an arbitrary percentage depending on where they perceive the risk at the position of the job. So whether it's at the concept, as it moves to the job, it might reduce from 25% to 15% to 7% to 2% to 1%, whatever they think. So I try to adopt a different approach to that, because that's only useful to a point. If you have a decent historic understanding of your risk profile on a construction job, then you're obviously building the same job again and again. We don't. Every job is unique and it brings its own risks for various reasons. We try to actively get risk workshops set up with the client team, the consultants, the contractor, some supply chain members. We all understand our worries, our concerns. We facilitate that session. And then we have a live risk register, which is born out of the project team's awareness of all the material they've been looking for months and months and months, or weeks, what it might be. So you have an informed position that then us as commercial managers can help, because really that needs to be looked at, and it is fortnightly, weekly, depending on when risks occur.
It has to be integrated,
Contingency drawdown, you're kind of going, right, why did this happen? I thought we had a mitigation, because it doesn't necessarily means you need money. You might need plans. So you might need a mitigation plan. And you give it to one person in your team, not two. You say, you're going to manage that. You can drag in the team as you need to. You're getting no money, but you're going to have to work on X, Y, Z on the plan to make sure it works. But for me, that contingency drawdown, that risk profile now gets woven into your cost management tools. So now you've got your reports where you're now managing a priced risk register. So not only have you said to your commercial manager, I want to know what the risks are. Brilliant. We've done this workshop. We've a view of them. Now you've got them priced. Now you've got a realistic view, and you sit with your client and you go through it and go, I think it's this and this is why, blah, blah, blah. And the risks on the packages, risks on X, Y, Z. And if your client disagrees with you, that's no problem. Put another column in. Client's view. Oh, look, it's nil. Our view, it's something, because the risk isn't always nil. It's something. But it's not about who's right or wrong. It's about the project requirements and
transparency and decision making there.
Which I wouldn't take away from anybody. If they want to run the risk of having zero contingency, super. But you need a team who can then generate contingency for you. That's finding a true value engineering. Again, more change without eroding the quality, bringing change into the business, or finding things that we can take out of the design that they've realized they don't need anymore to generate a buffer to allow the project to be successful at the project level that you said, I need it in 24 months and I'm giving you 25 million, 50 million to spend, whatever it is.
And like often I see in projects in the past was there's a risk register and we allocate risks to the register. We allocate a mitigation strategy, but then nothing really happens. So we look at the top 5. Mr. Client, Mrs. Client, you need to do something here. Otherwise, we're going to have a challenge. But they don't really understand what to do. Or even though we've identified it, I'm not saying I'm saying it has been identified by the team, nothing happens.
So that's really down to, I would have said, you need someone who's on the watch for that. And what we do is, every 2 weeks, that risk register is tabled. It's not discussed by everyone. It's discussed by a key member in the client team, the commercial manager, and then as and when they need to bring in people who should have actions completed by that stage. So your action plans, say for instance, we've had one recently where it was a logistics matter. We're going to be bringing in other subcontractors onto site who are not the contractors. There needs to be interfaces. There are interface plans. Have we got the interface plans agreed? No.
Yeah.
That's a risk.
Yeah.
So now you're talking about nothing that's going to cost money per se. Right now it won't.
Right now
if it's not managed, it will, because it'll bugger somebody else up. But you're trying to be in a place where those management plans, those action plans are critical to successfully delivering, having a realistic, robust program, having float in it, having been able to overlay them and go, there's a problem here and here. Well, if I do this activity in a different day, I can let you come in and do what you need to Mr. Client, and I'm happy to do that because it doesn't cost me anything.
Yeah. Again, a lot of our listeners will sit out there and go, well, I'm the project manager here. I control the risk. And often we say, like, you might have the responsibility, but it might be better suited to someone else in your stakeholder group to manage it for you, not necessarily you manage yourself. And the reason we prefer to take on the risk management role is because of the commercial impact of risk. We understand if something doesn't happen, this is what's going to happen to the budget. And it's that communication of that impact we are giving constantly to the client, saying, we need to do this, we need to do this.
It's just somebody who's owning and just reminding people. So I think most project managers out there will be absolutely, credibly busy putting out loads of fires from day to day. And I would say that they should, whilst they're responsible for it, they need to allow others to be accountable in their team. And that enables the team to grow then. You're basically saying to somebody else, I trust you to do this, have a plan, come back to me with the plan, agree the plan, and let them roll that out. Because otherwise what happens is now key members of the team, and we see this every day, you see key members of a team, rather than enabling their team to manage and because you're going to be paying them good money.
Yeah.
You should, if they're good enough and they have got a plan and you have got the belief in them, you should be giving them the ability in a controlled space to do that. And now we're into resource management out on the back of risk management. Yeah. So like that to me is another key, one of the things I bring up in every risk workshop: resources, logistics, design, program, procurement. You're looking at cost heads and allowing your team to interrogate and explore and go, actually, this is an issue. This is can we make a note of that? Yeah. And then that'll trigger somebody else to go, actually, that's bigger than you think.
It's almost like a checklist, really, if you go through those subtopics. But we mentioned something earlier about the models and the way we prefer all stakeholder groups to have access to the information that we use and produce. Mm-hmm. So our quantities come from the models. The better quality models, the more quantities we can extract, the more automation we can have. We prepare estimates and bills of quantities. But we want the stakeholder groups to assess our documentation for quality. So looking at our bills of quantities, our estimates, to make sure, have we included everything? Is there something missing? And then everybody interrogating the models themselves. So the quantities we believe are accurate, the design team believe are accurate, the contractor believes are accurate. We now have 3-4 stakeholder groups that have looked at the digital information. But digital workflows, are they improving the accuracy then within the traditional project life cycle or within the new project life cycles we're trying to create?
So over the last few months, I've seen this work in 2 ways. So one, where our advice, the model is, call it, absent on certain things because it's in infancy. So we then use our experience to layer in, these are the 10 things you're missing that we can't see. Yeah. Call a session, go through it, and people in the team go, absolutely need that, brilliant. So we do need these things. So we're going to see them in the next version of the model. Absolutely, brilliant, super. So that's one way where we're catching it. But in terms of how it's helping when you've got a more mature, robust design team and model, we are finding that collaboration is far greater. Yeah. So people are moving away from, I'll send it out, and in 3 weeks' time or 5 weeks' time, I'll get back the bill. Yeah. But the design is moved in 5 weeks. Yeah. So what we're finding is, if we're doing it in an attritional way, and the way we're able to export it pretty instantly, and I would say the more intelligence and rigor that's put into with your design team. And I say that from a controlled, because we go through certain controls as a business with the designers to ensure that it talks to whether it's Celebri or Costex or whatever it might be, that we've got a greater visibility of the output. So now what you're looking at is a component driven model tied back into instant quant generation against, I think we had something like 2,500 quants in the last cost plan we done, which was a stage three maybe.
Yeah.
And I would say 85% of those were instantly out of the model.
Yeah.
Now, what that allowed us to do is focus on the rates more.
Yeah.
So now we spent more time investigating what was about 70 different subcontracts, breaking them back, understanding where we were. That's intelligence. Yeah. Now we're actually saying, is that the product you're looking for? Which now you're going back as, rather than saying, I've got 15 or something, or I've got 15,000, you're going back, you do realize this is the product you're looking for. That's no longer in stock, or that's no longer, the new product is X. Yeah. We need to think about the specification and how it ties back into what you're procuring.
Yeah. And so what I find kind of fascinating about that entire workflow of the 3D models, the export in IFC, the communication digitally with that language of IFC into the estimating software, again, Costex is what we use. And then the ability to have an output of whatever you want afterwards, whether it is ICMS as a structure or your WBS or for your procurement.
276, whatever it might be.
Or it could be carbon. It could be carbon in RICS format. It could be master format. It doesn't matter. But
it's just data.
It's restructuring.
So we are using the same data to give the client their costs in their chosen format. And let's say that's in whatever it might be.
It doesn't really matter.
And we're giving the same data, provided it's correctly coded, to a contractor to procure their packages. That's efficiency.
In 2 different structures.
In 2 different structures, all the same quantities, very different look and feel, very different risk profile, but you're actually pulling them together in a succinct, instantly, really. That allows us to be more efficient with our time. So there's a natural benefit to the client there.
And just more efficient with your time. It then means that you're not having to update your documentation in 4 places. Your cost estimate structure, the client's required output, and then the contractor's required output.
So we were sitting with the contractor, and we brought in one of the specialist subcontractors, and they were like, we think there's X, Y, and Z in this. We went through the model. Okay, no, we need to added them in, or talk to the architect. They've added them into talk to their design. So within, I'm going to say 5 minutes, we had the underlying model was going to be updated. Mm-hmm. We then are just waiting for that to be updated, pulls through naturally to our cost. Yeah. So we're really doing very little, capturing the update, but it's now updated in the client's format and in the contractor's tender, which the subby already has visibility of. Yeah. And he knows the item's coming through the way he'd like.
And then sent out to him within an hour, within 2 hours later.
So then, say for instance, taking 2 stages into effect. So we send out the first, you send out addendums in the tender. Yeah. We send out the model with it. So you send out the model. Now we're able to go, and for the avoidance of doubt, here are the things that have changed between this model, and this is how it affects you visually. Yeah. So now we're having collaborative sessions, talking to the supply chain with call it facilitated by the GC, because we're now part of their team. Yeah. Ultimately, the client's paying for all of us. So why would you differentiate?
It's the client's team at the end of the day.
It's the client's team. So I'm saying to the contractor, tell us how you'd like it. We'll set it up. If it makes sense, let's do that. And they're going, absolutely. At which point now we're all talking the same language. The supply chain, and bearing in mind, we might be tendering, so there could be 2 or 3 of these people. Yeah. 2 or 3. And then we're saying, does that make sense to each of you? Yeah. Some will decline to price it in that fashion because that's the way they are. Yeah. Some will embrace it, and some will be actually wanting to understand the model a bit more because they're trying to understand what's their risk profile on this. Because I don't want anyone to get burned along that furniture, because ultimately it comes back to my risk plan. And that's not that cost will only flow to one person.
Yeah, that's the client at the end of the day. Regardless of what you do at risk, it only flows to the client, absolutely. But what's interesting about that setup, that partnering, that alliance, if you like, a lot of our listeners will be going, yeah, but Sean, hang on a second there now. The contractor has contractual responsibility for their procurement process and their documentation. Why the hell are you putting together the bill of quantities for the contractor?
If they take that approach, then they should certainly do their own. If they've already interrogated the underlying design, and bearing in mind, out of the model, we're getting the description, the code associated with that item, and the absolutely correct quantity.
Yeah.
Now you've got a source of honesty and truth that has been interrogated by 7 or 8 different people.
Yeah.
You can put it in a different format if you want, different structure, price it however you want. But you're getting, and if you work collaboratively, ultimately our duty, I'm with the RSCS, the Chartered Individual Arbitrators, various people. So our duties are to be have integrity, and to be, we work for the client. If we can't assist that process and bring very clear, transparent, honest, factual pieces of work to bear, everyone should be able to use that. Yeah. What I'm finding is some people will use that and use the intellect and challenge the intellect. So now they're saving themselves money and saving themselves weeks of time. Yeah.
And it's kind of getting the best stakeholder to do the job. And like contracts aside here, what we're all looking for is success in project delivery. And so by assessing the information, 3D models, drawings, specifications, etc., all stakeholders, we're now collaborating. But it is the contractor's responsibility at the end of the day to manage the subcontractors. It's also the contractor's responsibility to verify that they're satisfied and take responsibility for the bills of quantities. But the stakeholder group who are best fit to prepare the bill of quantities is you at the end of the day. So it makes sense that you do it for the project. We need to step a little bit back sometimes from the contractual cufflinks.
I've spent a lot of my career discussing, looking at contractual matters, and people who might know me would go, well, Sean, you take a slightly different view on that perhaps. But I'm absolutely in the place where we have to collaboratively work together. I would say there's a contractual framework we all have to exist in.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I would say that if you've now got a model which has been interrogated, and as you work and if you do truthfully want to use data to your benefit to make things more efficient, to be more collaborative, now you're in a place where you're gonna engage in that process and find the issue sooner. So that's the key here. Can we all engage and find the issue sooner? Update it, get the issue resolved. So now you don't have a risk on the matter. Or else you go, guys, you're not allowed working space. One of the things that was kind of said to me the last few days, I don't think you've allowed working space. Well, I definitely have, because the quant that person had was, say, 200% more than what I had. It was just ginormous. And I said, well, we've got enough working space there for about 10 projects. But it's more of that factual debate can happen.
It's based around something,
one of us was either right or wrong. Let's agree what it is, build it in, and move on. And I think that's where it needs to be, that kind of more intelligent approach.
Yeah. So again, we've moved so far away from cost estimating here into the commercial management approach. But like all of this information, like it's sometimes overwhelming: change management, risk management, procurement, contracts, bills of quantities, monthly reports, IFC models. But how do we communicate this with our client who might be or might not be a construction professional?
So we really take our time talking to our clients. So I make a concerted effort to see them at least a few days a month. As in, sometimes
FaceTime, like
exactly.
Yeah.
So most of the time it's digital. So, but the odd time we will meet in person. But I think the key thing is having that clarity and communicate with them what's happening on their project. So most of the time, whilst they might be on the job full time, they're involved in their own stakeholder management.
Absolutely.
So we have to then bring them up to speed in a way that's conducive for them feeling that they're also in control of their project. So you're spending time saying, these are the issues that's come up. This is the plans we've put in place. These are the things we now need to do. And with any project, there could be 10, 15 items that need to be addressed throughout the month. You can't do that in an hour in front of your client going, let's talk about the report. You can't. No, you have to have constant dialogue. The risk needs to be happening. You need to bites almost. It is. It's compartmentalizing it. Because otherwise you're it's overwhelming. So like we do most of that online, as in we do that Teams calls, talking them through. We cover off. It's like a cycle. It's just like a workflow cycle, but it goes through different workflows as you go through the project. So pre-contract to on-site, as well on-site as you go through from in the ground to the frame. You're in a place where you're trying to communicate how the risks are evolving, how they're being resolved, how changes are occurring. Change is one of the biggest things we combat with, and people being able to understand why it's changed. So we really focus on why, who's the originator, why is it come about? Are they coming with more budget?
Yeah.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
It's not so much to find who's accountable.
Yeah. Police it. It's
But we have to find out why, because ultimately there's going to have to be a reconciliation done.
Yeah.
And if we're within our contingency, fine, it's in the job. We need to be able to find if we forgot something, what did we forget as a team? Or if something's cost more, why did it cost more?
Yeah. And something that I've noticed recently was the visualizations in reporting. Not like numbers are numbers. And to some people, it's double Dutch. You can't understand the numbers because there's just so many of them. And so then by using visual representations of the numbers, or even visual representations of the model, saying, this is your major cost driver, here's your model representation. Oh, really? Okay, this is where we're putting all that.
So what we've started to do relatively recently, is it's a dual approach when we're delivering our estimates and our cost plans. So we've got the model live on the screen. We've got the relevant stakeholders in play. And then we're actually talking through an unpriced copy of the cost estimate or cost plan. And we're using the model, turning on and off elements as we discuss it. So straight
Foundations, for example.
Foundations, the envelope, the roof. And what you realize is people then start to kind of hone in on, is it the right scope?
Yeah.
Do I need the roof to see them?
Yeah.
What do you mean that we've got 5 components in the facade and it's only going to go to one? Yeah. It's only going to be delivered by one subcontractor. So now people start thinking how we're buying it and who we're buying from.
Yeah.
So for me, that's quite and also some of the visualizations we include in our reports.
Yeah.
That helps people who are not from a construction background immediately go, I see why we're spending 25% of our costs on that item now. Yeah. I didn't realize it was that big.
Yeah. In comparison to the rest, it's a very interesting approach, I think, that communication, because that's the biggest challenge we have as commercial managers, I would say, is we love the granularity and we're specialists in what we do, but how we communicate that to other stakeholder groups becomes a very key aspect of our artillery, I would say, in terms of, if they understand it, we've done a very good job.
And we should be as collaborative as we can be.
Yeah,
this is not about finding who's at fault.
No.
It's about working together within the confines of the original estimate throughout what is a fraught journey, and getting to a point that you can have another project with the team. That's a success. Yeah.
And you're talking about a number of years here in terms of the project life cycle. Like it's a long time with these timbers. But I think it's such a big topic. But I hope that everybody listening to us today now has an appreciation that, cost management is not just estimating. There's a whole commercial interconnectivity with a whole load of different processes, different stakeholders, the team, the client, etc., to make this really function and for clients and projects to be successful. But Sean, thank you very much for joining us today. It's great to talk to
internet introduction.
Sean, John, and the Kerry man. Take it easy. Thanks very much for listening. There's a LinkedIn link below in the show notes. We would love to connect with you.
We hope you enjoyed it and have you with us in the next one. Thank you very much.